Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the latest updates regarding the SNP's intentions to hold another independence referendum if they're successful in this year's elections, as well as Boris Johnson helping them out by travelling to Scotland and opening his mouth again. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this is like the Brexit referendum all over again, isn't it? A weak Conservative Prime Minister gearing up for a poll that they don't want and being the greatest asset to the other side. A lot of people, for example, voted Brexit in 2016 as a protest vote against David Cameron and his rather cruel austerity. You know, you sort of kind of wish he'd have stayed out of it, or maybe even switched sides like Boris Johnson. But now Boris Johnson himself is following in the same footsteps. First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced her intention to push ahead with Indy Ref 2 if her SNP gains an overall majority in the Scottish Parliament this May. This is almost certain to happen, in no small part thanks to Boris Johnson's constant and obvious disdain for the people of Scotland. And as I've said before, it's not that he's particularly disrespectful to Scotland. To nick a porridge quote, he treats us all with equal contempt. But the effect is amplified with Scotland because there aren't any groups really pointing out how, far from levelling up, he's actually widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots in England, for example. But there's a large number of MPs in Westminster whose sole purpose it is, their entire raison d'etre is to highlight the poor conduct of the government in Westminster regarding Scotland. Amplified all the more because the same party, of course, is dominant in the Scottish Parliament as well. On the flip side, there is no effective opposition to the MP in either Westminster or Holyrood. The other opposition parties in Westminster, of course, have got the Conservatives in their sights, and in Holyrood it's all just a mess. You know, and that is part of my only hope for the referendum when it inevitably comes. Oh, Phil, are you putting your hopes in a weak opposition? No, the fact that at the moment there is no opposition in the event of an independence referendum campaign, there would have to be. It's all one-sided at the moment. You know, people behave as if a referendum like this would absolutely vote leave. It's definite. Phil, look at the polls. Yeah, it's certainly most likely, but campaigns change things. If campaigns weren't such an awesomely powerful political tool, political groups wouldn't spend vast sums of money on them. Parties save up war chests specifically for election campaigns and then blow it all. Right now, the only group campaigning is the SNP. Boris Johnson, seems to be trying to help them out now and then. But, take last year, for example, he went on holiday to Scotland. He pretended to go camping for some reason. I don't know why he needed to do that. He was in Scotland. That wasn't a lie. What did it matter whether he was in a cottage or a tent? But anyway, for whatever reason, he decided to pretend to live in a tent. He did this to try and shore up support in Scotland for the Union. The opposite happened. Now he's visiting Scotland again, at a time when he and his government are trying to impress upon us all the importance of not leaving home unless we have to. He's travelling hundreds of miles with an entourage in order to further kick the country in the balls. Now, when another referendum campaign gets underway, as it surely will, strategists will be employed. There will be a campaign. Right now, there is nobody telling Boris Johnson what to actually do in order to preserve the Union. During a campaign, there will be. Of course, it may not be enough. As I say, there's various things that would mean it unlikely to be enough. But like I said, at the moment, it's all one way. There is no counter-campaign running at all. But as to the referendum itself, now, for the past year or two, whenever people have sort of said, whenever I've spoken about it and people said, but they need to get Westminster to authorise it. And on the Patreon live stream at the weekend, for example, someone was saying, you sort of see from the SNP's point of view, on the one hand, they'd absolutely like to have that referendum while the Conservatives are in power because the Conservatives are their best asset. On the other hand, they've got a better chance of getting the referendum with a Labour government. It's like, no, hang on a minute. No, we don't know that the Scottish government need the Westminster government to help them authorise an independence referendum at all. We don't know that. And I've doubted that we needed that myself, because just because Westminster passed the independence referendum in 2014 doesn't mean it's the only body that can issue one. You know, Scotland entered into the Union willingly. It retained its own legal system, its own sort of rather unique system of sovereignty. You know, that was before. I mean, Labour brought up, you know, the Scotland Act, so they brought a few things up to date. But even before then, you know, I'd have thought, well, hang on a minute, the sovereignty of Scotland is a little bit unique in the UK. But the Scotland Act might well provide the scope for the Scottish Parliament to issue their own referendum. And I don't mean a symbolic one. I don't mean sort of like getting into a Catalonia type situation. No one wants that. I mean a legally meaningful one. The bottom line is that what we have here is a complex issue of constitutional law that has never been tested. The Scottish Parliament have never tried to issue a referendum before. Now, nobody can say for certain exactly what the constitutional situation is. The reason why we have constitutional courts, for example, is to judge on such matters. And this is why I've said what the SNP should do is test it in court. The Court of Session, first of all, of course, and then the Supreme Court. You know, quickly as well, before Boris Johnson makes it a political beast like in America. At the moment, it's independent. And I know it's easy to fool yourself that, you know, the Scottish Parliament might have the power, because there's also there's natural justice in this. I know the way my brain's going to work. Should Scotland be able to decide for themselves whether they wish to remain in the UK or withdraw from it? Of course they should. Of course they should. It should be down to them and no one else. People should have an absolute right to self-determination. So there is that in my head, and I can understand how that might bias me towards, well, the Scottish Parliament exists, so surely it must have the rights to be able to withdraw Scotland from the Union in the same way as it entered the Union. I mean, you don't want individual towns or counties pissing about like this. You know, no nation could stand if xenophobic populism was given too much leeway. But Scotland has always remained its own entity, and, you know, much greater extent than Wales, and I'd still back Wales's right to choose if it wanted to. But there were a couple of interesting developments recently. So, of course, getting ahead of the elections, Nicola Sturgeon was talking about the second independence referendum. I'm going to go ahead with the second independence referendum if we win in May. And actually, I think at the moment she's just saying I'm going to go ahead with it. I think it's almost taken for granted that she will get a majority in May, and I don't think too many people are going to argue against that. The UK government, obviously journalists have been asking ministers about, oh, what do you think about this then? Nothing conclusive, of course. But there was a government minister, I'm not sure it was, I think it was a junior minister, refused to say that Holyrood wouldn't have the power. They were asked this, does Holyrood have the power to issue a referendum? They wouldn't be drawn on it. It's like, oh, well, that's not a, oh, of course they don't. That's interesting. And then Boris Johnson, so the Prime Minister himself, refused to say, so if Nicola Sturgeon did this, if the Scottish Parliament, I mean, it's really the Scottish Parliament, but if they gained overall control, there'd be nothing any other party could do about it. If they went forward with a referendum, then Boris Johnson was asked, would you mount a legal challenge? And he refused to say that he would. Now, of course, these could be political statements. It's not just them. It could well be that they want to avoid whipping up more support for the SNP. After all, there can be no greater weapon for those who wish to break away for a country than the government acting like despots. There would be a legal challenge. Of course there would be a legal challenge. Inevitably there would be a legal challenge. But they don't want to say that there would, which, as I say, you can take it one of two ways. It could be just a political move, or it could be that even though they would mount a legal challenge, they're not at all confident that they would definitely win that legal challenge. Now, so, I mean, that's why I still say the issue should be tested in court rather than simply going ahead. I mean, I don't understand why the SNP wouldn't just do this. I don't understand why they wouldn't have already put the wheels in motion for that last year. I don't get it. The SNP surely want to hold a referendum as soon as possible. And although it's a bit of a political dirty trick, but I mean, politics is dirty, they are better off holding the referendum, say, this year than next year. And the reason I say that is because, and I don't mean to capitalise on Boris Johnson's woeful pandemic response directly. No one in Britain is coming out of this with any credit. You've got different parties running the show in different parts of Britain. None of them are looking good out of this on the international stakes, but obviously Wales and Scotland can at times look better than England, just because Boris Johnson is the biggest clown we have here. No, it's not that. During the pandemic, of course, you'd want to have as much postal voting as possible. Voting would take a bit of effort. Now, whenever you have a situation with a vote where there's a bit of effort required, that's likely to mean lower voter turnout. Lower voter turnout means the ones who are okay with the status quo don't turn out to the same extent. It's the ones who are fired up that turn up. And that tends to be a greater proportion of people who want to change the status quo. I mean, yes, you'll also get the people who see the danger and want to remain in the UK as well. But Boris Johnson, for all the fact I'll say he'll pay top strategists to form a campaign to advise him, and all of a sudden he'll start saying the right things at that point, which he hasn't been so far. He's distracted by Brexit and COVID. Sure, the SNP are as well, but they're fighting a defensive battle at the moment. The polling has the fact that at the moment, without anything else changing people's perceptions, right now, were there to be a poll, people would vote for independence. So Boris Johnson's campaign would have to reverse that. And so I think that's the SNP's best bet, because polls already show a majority ready to destroy my country. And on that point, I will say, if the Conservatives do destroy this aspect of my identity as well, it'll be a bigger blow personally than Brexit, because we're going to rejoin the EU one day, inevitable. Of course it is. The people that largely voted to remain were younger people. And the younger people are becoming more numerous. It may be a while. I may be retired when it happens. I hope not. I hope it happens rather sooner. But it will happen. That is, at the moment, Brexit is temporary. But if Britain breaks up, not so much the UK, because I do believe Ireland will reunify. And although it's got nothing to do with me, I instinctively am in favour of that. It would have been marvellous if we could have all just got along as one big happy family, a strong union inside an even stronger one. But that is the poison of history for you. But if Britain splits up, that's it. I mean, that's not something that will be reversed. There'd be no point. What would be the point? And at that point, I don't know what my attitude will be exactly to the Conservatives, because in the past, I've viewed a fair number of them with contempt, it has to be said. A lot of them I've regarded as selfish. Others still, people that are fundamentally trying to be decent, but I disagree with them. But if they destroy my nation, it will be them that's destroyed my nation. Then I don't even know that I'll be able to be in the same room as them again. Which is unpleasant to me. It's unpleasant to me that I would ever feel that I couldn't talk to someone just because they have very different views. But the divisiveness in British politics is chokingly toxic right now. And I am worried it's going to get worse before it gets better, and that permanent damage is going to be done. But there we are. No shortage of interest, I suppose, in British politics. We've already had a few crazy years, and it doesn't look like we're running out of fuel just yet either. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.